episode 3, part 2. Episode 3 went quite a long time, close to a little over an hour and a half, actually. So we divided it into 2 parts. So we're going to jump right back into episode 3, part 2, and enjoy.
Okay, let's hit on, this is still a nutrition episode here, so let's get back to, let's talk about protein versus carbs versus fats for just a minute, because a lot of people are really confused about even what these things are. And just keeping it really simple, we'll just say that protein is, a building block for everything in your body. That's probably the easiest way to think about it, Carbs are energy. Carbs are a source of glucose, sugar energy, good source of quick fuel. Fat is our main source of energy. And also fat is a building block for certain things too, cell membranes. And I think our brain is actually, don't quote me on this, but I want to say it's 80% fat by weight or something like that. But in any case, so you got protein and fats, those are essential building blocks. And fat's a primary source of energy, and then carbs are just another additional source of energy. One way I like to think about those, though, is separating them into 2 categories. One being protein, that, and just consider that your building blocks for your muscle and a lot of things on your body. And then carbs and fat, I would just put into a separate category that I would call energy. And I actually got this idea from doctor that I follow. His name is Ted Naiman. He just released the book about this. I think he called it the PE diet for protein and energy. But in any case, it's just the idea that understanding that whether you're eating carbs or fat, you're eating energy there, and your body only needs so much energy per day. So, people talk about going on high carb diets or low carb diets, and there's always a debate and fight in these 2 camps and stuff. You can get away with either, but the point is you need a certain amount of energy. So say this is carbs and this is fat. Maybe this is how much energy you need. If you want to eat more carbs, go for it. That just means you need to eat a little bit less fat. And then if you want to eat a lot of fat, go for it. That just means you need to eat a little bit less carbs. One of the biggest problems that we have in America today is that we're eating a lot of both of them, and processed food is really what's to blame for this, because processed food is where we get the massive combinations of fat and carbs. If you think of like potato chips or donuts, cookies, these are all a lot of carbs and a lot of fat together. So that's another reason why processed foods are to be avoided. But I would say my recommendation is to prioritize protein first. I like to tell people to get about 100 grams of protein a day, and that's going to be super individual. Some people will do fine with 60 or 70. Some people might be up around 150 or so, but I find that a lot of people are dramatically under consuming protein. I'll talk to clients, and when we add up what they're eating in a day, they're getting 40 grams of protein, and they're trying to lose weight. And a lot of times, if people just get their protein, if you take someone who's eating 40 grams of protein a day and bump them up to like 80 or 100, weight loss often becomes effortless because protein is so much more satiating. It'll keep you full a lot longer. And then, so get your 100 grams of protein in a day is my basic strategy. And then fill in the rest with your energy, whether you want it to be from carbs and not so much fat, or fat and not so much carbs. Or a mixture of both, but keeping them kind of, at a low or, at an appropriate level. And that's going to differ for each individual depending on how many calories they need. But I like the idea of separating it into protein and then energy, because, the carbs and fat thing gets really confusing for people. If you just remember that they're both energy, and if you don't take in enough energy, you're going to feel fatigued and you're going to not feel so good. You might lose some weight initially, that's essentially what a diet is. But if you take in too much energy, it's going to just get stored on you as fat. So you want to keep the energy appropriate, and just remember to kind of toggle between whether it's going to be, if the carbs are up one day, the fat should be lower. If fat's up one day, the carbs should be lower. I don't know, do you want to touch on that at all? Anything about carbs, fat, and protein?
Yeah, I think I sort of do that naturally. Like if I have more of like intense day training wise, let's say just jujitsu, then I'll take in more carbs generally. And then my quieter days, maybe more fat, less carbs, but you're absolutely right. I try not to get high in both.
Right.
And I don't know why. I've really actually never even thought of it like what you're saying, but just sort of naturally feeling good while I eat. You know, if I have a lot of carbs, a lot of fat, and a lot of protein, like I don't feel
Lot
good
of
after.
food.
It's a lot of food, but like I could, load up on carbs and a good set of, protein, some source of protein and feel good. And same thing with fats, but my default probably 70% of the time is, Andy, is probably higher fat, higher protein.
Yep. That's the next thing I was going to go to. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I would say I agree entirely, and I thought that was also an interesting concept or way of thinking about it, that it's, protein and then energy, and it 100% is. I think that everybody's different, and obviously there's different scenarios. So given whether I'm cutting or bulking or doing whatever, obviously these macros change accordingly. Generally though, I do try to probably eat more fat. I would say I think my fat is definitely around somewhere between 20 to 30% of my calories, no matter what. And I think people are very afraid of that. I know keto diet is, kind of coming on as a fad diet, and people are, less, wary about fat. But for a while there, fat was a big thing, and people would stay away from things like butter or, other things just because they're like, it's fat, I can't eat that.
Right.
And so I would say just don't be afraid of fat. That's not the culprit. Your body needs it. So
nice. Those are actually the next two things that I wanted to hit on while we're talking about fat. Is the next topic is going to be fat adaptation, and then the next thing is going to be kind of the misconception that fat is unhealthy. Exactly what Ricky touched on. And Ricky, I really appreciate that you keep throwing in, you keep reminding us that everyone, this is so individual. It always depends on the person. Like that's one thing I've learned through this is, no matter how great an approach works for one person, it might completely backfire on another one. People are just so different in terms of their individual physiology and metabolism, and then their goals and all that kind of stuff. So that's why I'm trying to keep this very, very general. We'll do an episode in the future on like keto and who it might be appropriate for and who not, and so on. And this one's just an overview. So yeah, thank you for that. The next topic was fat adaptation. And I know, Josh, you've read about this and stuff. It's kind of been a big concept in the paleo movement, over the last 10, 15 years. And I also, just like you guys, I lean a little more in the direction of fats. So like this is my energy. I tend to keep fats a little bit higher and carbs a little bit lower most of the time. But every now and then I'll switch it just a little bit. But on the whole, I keep my fats higher. Mainly, fats are essential for health. They are an important source of energy. They're more satiating in the long run. So if you eat a fatty meal, it's more likely to keep you full longer versus you could wolf down 300 grams of carbohydrates, pretzels and a soda, and then you're hungry again an hour later. Fats also carry fat-soluble nutrients and vitamins, A, D, E, K, and other nutrients that, and they help shuttle that into your body, that you wouldn't be able to get without a fat source. They make up cell membranes, the brain tissue, all that kind of stuff I was saying. So fats are a really important structural component of the body, and they're actually nourishing in a way that carbohydrates aren't. Carbohydrates tend to be more, not always empty calories. I mean, you can eat, a sweet potato, you can eat some real food carbs, and there's some good things in there. But on the whole, fats tend to be a little more nourishing. But I wanted to talk about fat adaptation, which is just the concept that your metabolism is trainable. If you are eating carbohydrates all day, if you're eating 6 times a day and it's all just carb heavy, you're teaching your body how to burn carbs for fuel, and it gets very good at that and very efficient at it, but it starts to become less efficient at burning fat for fuel. And likewise, if you eat fat most of the time but keep carbs low, now your body is forced to learn how to utilize fat for fuel efficiently. And that's something I think some people might want to consider training is training their cells, their mitochondria, to burn fatty acids effectively and efficiently, especially if they have some stored fat on their body that they want to burn off. You want to actually get your cells capable of using that fuel. So that's just kind of one of the downfalls of a very high carbohydrate diet, is you might lose that metabolic efficiency when it comes to using fats for fuel. It's actually something, Ricky, you might have heard of this, the Randall cycle is what it's called in, yeah, biochem. Just the kind of the idea that carbohydrates and fat kind of compete with one another a little bit. When you've got a lot of carbs in there, you can't burn fat very well. And likewise, fat hinders your ability to use carbs effectively. So that's a good reason not to have a lot of both of them at the same time. You want to have one or the other to make your metabolism a little more efficient. Just other little points, high carb can lead to energy swings, you know, the blood sugar roller coaster. High carb tends to lead to more cravings a lot of times in people. Mainly that's because of the blood sugar rising and falling, but you know, sugar, breads, cookies, etc. Those tend to be the most addicting things in our food supply. Nobody really gets too addicted to a fatty food like eggs or, you know, something like that, or almonds. You know, you get addicted to the high carby stuff. So my strategy, me personally, is, like I said, I like to lean a little more in the direction of fat. I like the idea of what I've been doing for a while now is if I eat 6 times a day, maybe 4 or 5 of those meals are going to be really high carb or high fat and low carb. And then maybe 1 or 2 of them will be the other way around with the high carb and low fat. Because I do like to have carbs in my diet. I find that it makes my workouts better and it gives me more food options. But I try to make sure that I get at least a few meals each day, or a good time period every day where I'm keeping the carbohydrates kind of low and running off of fat a little bit more. Sounds like you guys kind of do a similar thing.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say there's probably 2 strategies that I kind of hold for something like that, which would be either I do a fast, you know, which would then put me into that fasted state where I then utilize fat for fuel.
Yep.
And, or like you were saying, I would have probably like 3 high fat days in a row. So therefore my body kind of switches to that. And then if I need to do like a refeed or something like that with like carbs, then I have a high carb day. You know, there's tons of different strategies. I'm not saying that that's what I do all the time, but you know, so most of the time I'd say I stay pretty even between carbs and fat. But you know, there are those times where it's like, okay, I need to make that adjustment and, you know, keep my metabolism on its toes, so to speak, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. Good with that, Josh?
Yeah, no, for sure. I vary it, but I'm definitely more protein fat. But again, it's like Ricky and you said, Andy, it's dependent on a lot of factors. But yeah, I'd say the average person, when we look at it from a client standpoint, would be better off higher protein, higher fat, just probably because unless they don't have a sedentary lifestyle, maybe we could argue more carbs. But yeah, protein fats definitely is probably going to get you a lot farther than protein and higher carbs.
Yeah, that seems to be what we see. That's where clients have the most success generally.
Yep.
But individual. So yeah, let's touch on really quick. Ricky already brought it up, but just the fact that so many people are afraid of fat, they think it's unhealthy. You know, that was always the message that was pushed throughout all of the 70s, 80s, 90s, and it's finally starting to reverse right now. But you know, just based on some crappy science that was done back in like the 50s and 60s, we won't get into that right now. We know the whole story, but that's for another time. You know, just the truth that fat really isn't bad for you. Good fats are incredibly healthy. They should be the backbone of a healthy way of eating, really. But I did want to say there are good fats and bad fats, and I think it's really important that we talk about that for a second. So like the good fats, they tend to be, I'll say monounsaturated and saturated, but just to give examples, animal fats like from beef, bison, venison, fish, any of that kind of stuff, butter, dairy fat, that's included. Plant sources would be like avocado, most nuts and nut butters, coconut oil, dark chocolate. These things are nutritious. Some of them are anti-inflammatory, some of them, but either way, they're not inflammatory. Versus the bad fats, we're pretty much entirely talking about the polyunsaturated vegetable oils, which, yeah, they shouldn't be called vegetable oils. They're industrial seed oils is probably a better name for them. But that's going to be your soybean oil, cottonseed oil, corn oil, canola oil, sunflower and safflower oil. We see these in every processed food if you look at the ingredients list. And they take a lot of processing to produce. They're devoid of nutrients. They oxidize easily, which can cause a lot of problems down the road. They're pro-inflammatory. They directly cause weight gain in certain areas that I'm not going to talk about right now, but that's good fats and bad fats. I mean, do you kind of agree with that list, you guys, or anything to add to it?
Yeah, I think people would be very smart to eliminate those bad fats. Those vegetable oils it's like petroleum.
I think it's the worst thing in the American diet is vegetable seed oils. And especially if you go out to restaurants and stuff, if you're getting French fries or anything fried, now not only is it fried in vegetable oil, usually soybean oil, but it's been heated to a really high level. So it's all oxidized, which, as I said, causes a lot of other problems down the road.
Yeah, and I think, when you're reading, like we talked about ingredient lists, that is really important to be aware of that list, Andy, that you said, only because a lot of health foods are, like promoted health foods are still including a lot of that. Like Newman's dressing, there's a lot of things that on the label are like, wow, it says made with avocado oil.
I was wondering if you're going to say that. Yeah. Made with olive oil. And then when you turn around on the back, the first ingredient is soybean oil. And the last ingredient is olive oil. Like they put in a few drops, but then the front of the label says made with olive oil.
Yeah. So again, read the labels, but those, if I could only have control over eliminating one thing in my diet, it would be those oils, those harmful oils.
Yeah. 100% with you.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, I thought that list that you put out there was pretty solid. And I even try to, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, if you could think of anything else to add to it as far as good fats, I tried to make a short list there, but I think I covered like kind of the main ones that people would eat.
Yeah, I don't know if you mentioned olive oil or not.
Well, yeah, I did actually forget that, but you're right. Olive oil is definitely on the list. But
the thing is, I mean, it has to be a high quality olive oil. A lot of the times you can get just, olive oil that's, generic tends to be cut with all those bad oils, like you were saying.
Yes.
So that's the one big issue is, and I even try to stay away from olive oil as much as I can, unless I really do find that high purity or high quality stuff.
Yeah. Which is kind of hard to find. I guess the highest quality olive oil right now, as far as trying to make sure that the entire bottle is 100% pure olive oil. They say to buy California olive oil because they have stricter standards there. So if you get the USDA
or Italian, Italy has a really good one, but it's expensive. It's imported.
Yeah, I gotcha.
So
all right, let's hit. I only have two last short ones here for us. One is just the concept that habits and behavior changes tend to be key. And I struggle with this a little bit because healthy eating, I've been doing it for 20 years now. So it's finally become kind of natural and intuitive to me. But I've noticed that for sure, when I'm helping a client out, I want to just tell them, these are good things, you should eat these. These are bad things, you should not eat these, and whatever. And sometimes the knowledge isn't actually what they are lacking. In fact, usually it's not. Like the typical client will know that Mountain Dew is bad for you and it's going to make you gain weight and so on, right? But then they can't stop drinking Mountain Dew, So I often focus on educating people on what is healthy and what is unhealthy to know success, because what really needs to be addressed are their habits and their behaviors. So I don't know if you guys have any ideas about that, any strategies people can use to, say it's someone who knows what the healthy foods are and what they know the good and bad list, but they're just struggling to make the change because the stuff on the bad list is what they're just they're used to eating. You know, their whole cupboard is full of processed foods and whatnot, and they haven't figured out how to incorporate the healthy stuff yet, and they're struggling to just jump over. They don't need any more education. They just need to figure out how to change their habits and incorporate the good stuff. Any ideas as far as strategies go? Got a couple, but I'll wait for you guys first.
I would just do like a self check-in with yourself to see if those habit changes are important to you, in terms of you're saying, Andy, that they already know that these foods over here are better than these foods, but they just haven't been able to make the switch. Mm-hmm. I think there's a cognitive piece with committing to healthier eating and the process and habits around that. Like, you have to commit to it.
Yeah.
And
yeah,
we can have all the knowledge in the world with a lot of this stuff, but I don't know if there's any quick tips or hacks on that in terms of getting people to turn that light bulb on. The hard part, the knowledge, I think is the big thing. Like, if you have the knowledge, but you're not implementing it, then you'd have, for me, it would just, is it important to you? And then when we get into the stress management and, you know, some of the other things we've talked about, that definitely plays a role. But I think the first big thing is are you setting time aside, and are you wanting to learn more, and is it important to you? And if it is, I think that'll somewhat happen naturally.
That's a good point, that the effort is involved. Anytime you want to make a change, it's going to be a little bit uncomfortable because you've got your regular habits in place, and it's always easiest to just do what you've always done. And so you got to allow yourself that, what do they say, 21 days or whatever it takes to make a new habit. Maybe one strategy would be starting small, trying to introduce like one new food every few days or something like that.
For sure.
You got to put in that effort to slowly get from where you are to where you want to be.
Yeah, and you're going to...
So,
yeah, go ahead.
Okay, yeah, go ahead. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So, you know, I can tell you what worked for me, at least, you know, whenever I was going through these things, especially, you know, soda is the biggest one, you know.
That was the hardest for me to get rid of.
It is. It's the hardest for anybody. I mean, no matter who you are. And, you know, like Josh said, it has to be a mindset. You have to want to, or first off, you're not going to force yourself if you don't want to. But some strategies that I did, I incorporated drinking more water.
Yeah, that's the one I have written down. Nice.
So I started to drink more water, which then, you know, satisfied my thirst craving. Yep. Instead of grabbing that soda or that, you know, whatever it happened to be, or juice or anything. Yep. You know, I grab water. One, it's free. It's the cheapest thing you can possibly drink, and it's probably the best thing for you.
Really good for you. Yep.
So that
helps. People will mistake being thirsty for being hungry. There's a lot of times when people think that they're hungry, and then you have a 12-ounce glass of water or something, and wait 15 minutes and you're not hungry anymore, miraculously. You know, your body was just dehydrated and needed some water.
Yeah. And I mean, where's your body going to get that water if you don't give it water? It's going to try to extract it from food, right? And so it kind of, yeah, like you said, it kind of messes with your mind, so to speak, or whatever. And one other thing that I did was I incorporated flavored, like, sparkling water.
Yeah.
So if I wanted some sort of like a flavor with my meal or something, and that was kind of like after I incorporated the water and slowly started to go down to like maybe one soda a day or something like that, I'd be like, well, what if I tried, you know, this flavored seltzer or something like that? And then slowly but surely I found ones I liked, and I was like, well, you know, this is enough. So I could, and that kind of helped me, but it's a slow progression. You can't just be like, I'm stopping soda today. And then some people might be able to, but I can tell you majority of the people can't.
Yeah.
So
it might be, people need to be a little easier on themselves and maybe say, I'm going to go from drinking 4 cans of soda a day down to 3. And then in a few more weeks, it'll be 2 cans a day. And, you know, just kind of get down there in whatever way works for you. But yeah, going cold turkey, especially with something like soda, doesn't work so well for a lot of people.
Yeah, Andy, we talked, I think, in the last podcast about small wins being big accomplishments.
Huge.
So that's key. And Ricky, that was a great point. I think you said, you know, just making some kind of positive change in the diet, but it doesn't have to be big. But then you carry that long term, and then another small change adds on to that. I think too many people want to jump in full bore Monday morning and go for it. And I think that's a really tough change to make unless, you're wired very uniquely. But yeah, and one of the things I did to change, because I was eating poorly up until, and this will be hard to believe, but man, it was college, so 2005. So I was eating whole wheat pasta, ragu, Alfredo sauce, and cereal, and it was bad. And then you throw alcohol in there, and then you're doing exercise, and I thought I was doing pretty well, but then you learn, like you said, you evolve. But I started to find health foods that I really enjoyed, and then I would make sure that I never ran out of them, because then I couldn't make a bad choice. So I make sure I don't have one bar of dark chocolate in there, I have 6, or a specific protein powder that I really like, or sweet potatoes that I really like. Like, I'm making sure that fuel supply is always there, because if it's not, especially in the midst of change, you're going to resort back to something else that's not a good choice.
That perfectly links to one of the things that I had down, which was don't buy the bad stuff, and we've all heard this, but just don't have it in the house. If the bag of chips or cookies or whatever isn't in your pantry, you're not going to eat them. Try to have a little separation between you and the things that you're trying to wean yourself off of. Make it so you have to go to the supermarket if you really want it that badly.
Now, I want to touch on that a little bit, because for me that would be easy. I don't have any children or anything.
That's the hard part.
But yeah, if you have a child and your child likes hot dogs and macaroni and cheese, it's hard to not have that in your pantry.
For sure.
So
not all these tips are going to work in every situation.
But one thing that I think could work, or at least make you, something that I personally also did, I built a pantry in my basement, and if I have a bad food in my house or something along those lines, I keep it there, because it's out of sight, it's out of mind. And it takes work. It takes work for me to go down the stairs, go into there, grab it, and come all the way back up to get it. Nice. So it's just an extra thing. You might do it for your child, but you'd be surprised how lazy human beings are. And and whenever you're like, well, the apple's in my fridge right here, I could just grab it. You're more inclined to do that versus
that trip downstairs and back.
For sure.
Yeah.
One thing I'll add in with the kid thing, having a 7-year-old, is I think that they should be eating pretty darn close to the parents. And it doesn't, obviously, like Asher doesn't eat just like me, but the majority of it is coming from the same sources. And so, will he have a peanut butter and jelly sandwich? Sure, right? But what's his dinner? Chicken, vegetables, avocado. What are his snacks? Laura bars, Go Macro bars, beef jerky. So yeah, I would say that, Andy, you said don't have it in the house. If the parents are eating clean, whole foods out of the garden, good meats, good sources of food, then the kids should be getting most of it. I know kids are super picky eaters, and dinner time can be a nightmare, and lunches and stuff, but I'm continually trying to hack that with Asher with did you like that? Or what is this? And I make a health food sound super cool, or some kind of challenge. And we're just building that into the routine. And it's definitely not perfect. And it in the beginning, I really thought it would be. I'd be like, yeah, it's going to be 10 out of 10 and easy. It's not. Kids like shit food. They like lots of sugar. Their friends eat it. It's at lunch. At lunchtime food, they're serving Alpo dog food. It's just horrible, horrible choices. And they're surrounded by that. So there's an empathy piece with, you've got these kids running around really not knowing what's good or bad. So will it be perfect? No, but I think that if your pantry is stocked with just regular good food, they're going to have to figure out some kind of variety that they like with that.
I think having kids prepare meals and cook with you is a good idea too. They get more
Yeah.
interested in what they're eating, they see what it is, and
Mhm.
maybe they're more likely to eat the meal that you've made as opposed to you just putting it down in front of them and saying, eat that, you know?
Yeah, and you can if you find a good health food that a kid likes, they don't mind eating the same thing over and over.
Yeah, right.
And so
I do too.
yeah, really. And so you get 2 or 3 good wins on the board. You can repeat those 2 or 3 for months on end. And then hopefully you're finding another 2 or 3 during that time period to start interjecting. And then they go in phases where they hate this and love this, but you've got sort of a pool to choose from. But
Yeah.
the pool doesn't have to be big. That's one thing I've seen is for a period of time, I was I'd ask Asher 8 different things you want for dinner. Now it's one. And you've got a choice. You can have dinner and have this or not. And then it's always a yes, but it's something that I know that her like and enjoy. But the more choices you're giving this child, whether it's healthy or not, it's really hard for them to choose that. And it's just going to make your life way harder. And you're going to end up eating something different from your kid, which, I don't know if that should be the case in a
I
lot
think
of.
you touched on a really good point there where, we don't need a huge variety of foods. People tend to eat the same things most days, a little different day to day. But I mean, once you've got 5 or 6 healthy meals that that you like,
Yep.
you can rotate between those forever.
Yep.
So with the little wins thing, it's every time you find one healthy thing that it's easy to make, you enjoy eating it, you've done it a few times, and you're like, okay, that's in my rotation now, and I like that. Every one of those that you get is another little win. And once you've got, a list of 5 to 10 of them, you're pretty much set for life there.
Yeah, and you can change the variety within that meal,
or how you flavor it,
sauces, seasonings, flavors. Yeah, there's a lot of varieties. Yeah.
So the last thing I wanted to hit was Ricky brought it up right in the very, very beginning, but sometimes they call it the 80-20 rule. Just the idea that you don't have to be perfect all the time. You need to have a little bit of fun in life and have your cheat days and stuff. And I definitely, I try to help people realize this, that, you got to be able to enjoy life. Mental health is incredibly important, stress relief, having fun with friends, having dinner with friends and whatnot. Having a glass of wine to unwind and, whatever. So yeah, I guess what I'm saying is me personally, I try to eat super clean, with me, it's probably more like 90 or 95% of the time. But when I do that, I don't feel bad or guilty at all when I want to go and have whatever I have for fun on a Friday night with a friend or something like that. You don't have to feel like it's all or nothing. You have to go 100% right. I like that 80-20 rule as a general rule of thumb. And you can mix that in throughout your day. 4 of your meals are healthy, and then one of them is kind of more of a cheatish sort of meal. Or maybe Monday through Friday, you eat perfectly clean, and then you have a cheat weekend, or however you want to incorporate it. But remembering to give yourself a little bit of fun is important. Don't beat yourself up over trying to be perfect. And that way too, when you do have a bad meal, you don't think to yourself, oh, I'm off the wagon, throw it all out the window, and then just binge for a week straight. Oh, that's fine. That's my 20% for today, One word of warning, though, I guess I would say is my caution to people is when they hear the 80-20 rule, sometimes they can take it too far. It's like an excuse to overindulge or to eat really terrible things. And then sometimes that 20 can become 30 or 40 or 50, and then we run into trouble. So you got to kind of stay honest with yourself.
Yeah, I like the 80-20 rule if it's a true 80-20,
Right.
Because the 80% will soon take over. You're going to want to do less poor meals because when you're detoxified, feeling good, energy's high, you generally don't feel great after eating poorly.
Right.
You can feel not sick after eating poorly if you're already toxic, but if you're clean and then you just indulge and have fun and, all of that, generally you won't feel great after.
And
So
you're starting to connect what those foods make you feel like, and you want them less.
yeah, and you get addicted to feeling good. And it's not like you're like, oh, I gotta eat whole foods again. You're like, yeah, I like enjoy like eating whole foods and feeling good. You know? And so yeah, that is the one side effect that for sure I'll get, and I'm sure you guys do, but when you do go off that wagon and have fun and have something you don't normally need, there's normally some kind of repercussion, achy joints the next day, digestion issues, bloating, fatigue, you know, or sometimes nothing. Sometimes you wake up and you're like, man, that was awesome and I feel great. So, but the 80% slowly starts to win over time. I've seen it time and time again, not only in myself, but in a lot of people.
Mhm.
Nice.
Yeah, I would say shoot for like 90-10, and if you fall at the 80-20, then you're doing well.
Think about it.
Certain scenarios that I come across, in my life, my corporation that I work for, they provide lunches sometimes when we have like big meetings. And, sometimes that could be 1 day a week, or sometimes that could be 5. And so it's like, I can understand where someone's like, oh man, this is a free meal, I can't pass that up.
Right.
But I think it just came across my own plate was just yesterday. I had someone offer me pizza. They had pizza at their meeting. They're like, hey, we have some left over. You want some? And I was like, I could, I eat pretty clean and I could do it. But I was like, you know what? I know that I have like that we're going to celebrate, a birthday this weekend. So I'm like, I'd rather just eat my clean meal now and have my cheat meal with, my relative or whoever it happens to be.
Nice.
And so that you got to make those tough choices sometimes. I'm not going to say it's always easy, but that's just one scenario. And traveling was another big one. Whenever I used to, before the whole pandemic and COVID thing, I was traveling 30 to 40% of my time. And it was really hard to find those healthy meals. So like when Josh brought up where he's like, I found a healthy place, so I bought, 2 meals. Sometimes I'd do the same thing. I'd be like, wow, this one airport I landed in had like this, salad place that was phenomenal. So I'd buy like 3 salads.
Yep.
Just so that I'd have them for my trip to Asia or something like that. But
smart.
yeah.
That wraps up all the topics I've got here. I don't know if you have any closing remarks or anything, but we went for a while here, so I think we're good on this episode.
Oh yeah, this is a lot of fun. If you guys don't have anything else, we're start signing off here and start prepping for next week. This is great. Thanks, Ricky. Thanks, Ricky. For anyone listening to this, we ask that you subscribe to our YouTube channel, Co-Movement. Very easy to find. You'll be notified as soon as new episodes are uploaded. If you want to become a new client of Co-Movement, that's great too. If you're committed, we do in-person coaching. We have a new Achieve online coaching program we're building out now, where you can follow online programming, have accountability with email and whatnot. It's brand new. It's going to be off the charts good. You can email us at info@comovement.com for any more information or questions. And if you have questions that you want us to address at the end of the next podcast, email them to that same email address, info@comovement.com, and we will address it. We'll give you our personal opinion on it. Maybe it can help you. Maybe it's just that one tip that you need to really, move forward with your goals. And with that's that. We're going to sign off with episode 3 and see everyone next week.
Cool. See you later, guys.
All right. See ya.